Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. There's a new report out there saying that Marvel might be bringing Jonathan Majors back as Kang for the upcoming Avengers movies, so we'll break it all down and explain what that might mean, what's actually going on behind the scenes. Because it would be a pretty big deal, but we do know some of what's going on during Avengers Doomsday and then during Avengers Secret Wars and what the Russos are doing with the story now that they're bringing Robert Downey Jr. back as Doctor Doom, and they pivoted from Avengers Kang Dynasty to the Doomsday Doctor Doom plot. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. This is just the beginning. They're going to be filming Doomsday really soon, and it's Super Bowl weekend, so we're going to get a bunch of trailers. Of course, I will do videos for as much of that stuff as possible. Just imagine how awkward it's going to get for the Russos next year answering questions about this on the press tour. But you might have seen recently there were a lot of reports about Jonathan Majors maybe coming back. There were a lot of people saying he was coming back now, and a lot of people saying he was not coming back now. So there's still a lot of confusion over what's happening, but it does sound like Marvel is considering actually bringing him back. And it does seem like Jonathan Majors' career has turned back around and he's finally getting big roles again. Recently, Michael B. Jordan, for instance, just shouted him out on his Instagram. This is for his new movie Magazine Dreams that he filmed before all the legal trouble went down, but it wasn't finished. It wasn't supposed to come out till all that was going down, so it got delayed because of the legal problems and negative attention that he was getting at the time. Now in present day, they felt like enough time has gone by that they're releasing the movie finally, but he made it a long time ago. And probably no coincidence here, one of the other reasons why Michael B. Jordan was shouting him out publicly on his Twitter the last couple of days is because reportedly he's bringing his character back. He's bringing Jonathan Majors' character back from Creed 3 in Creed 4, which big studio movie. So it does kind of seem like his career is back on track. And for the most part, since all those legal problems went down, he's mostly been fairly contrite, even though he's still been fighting in court trying to clear his name. One of the big reasons that Disney and Marvel point out them bringing back actors that they have fired has been those actors' actions after they were fired, or directors in the case of people like James Gunn. I'll point that out in a second too. There have been a couple very high-profile examples of them firing people, then bringing them back for specific reasons. But if someone as high-profile as Michael B. Jordan, beloved inside the Marvel Universe as his Killmonger, he's come back a couple different ways during the What If series too. If he's comfortable celebrating Jonathan Majors publicly, then that does seem like it's a herald to him coming back to Marvel eventually too. Or at the very least, making it seem like it's way more likely that Marvel might bring him back in the future. If you didn't follow all the legal stuff when it was going down last year, he was convicted of 2 charges of assault and harassment of his girlfriend. He might try to continue to appeal to try and clear his name, but for the most part, all that legal stuff is done. Like all the stuff that was going to happen legally has happened. Time went by, he got married to another woman, and then eventually enough time goes by that he starts making other movies again. Sounds like he's going to be making Creed 4 with Michael B. Jordan pretty soon. If Marvel were to actually bring him back, what they would probably do is still, because they're still planning on going with the Avengers Doomsday version of the movie now with the story completely changed, is they would just include him in some small scene at the beginning to get past the Kang storyline, wrap up Kang's storyline in general. My early theory is they would just have Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom reveal that he had killed the Council of Kangs, and that would be the end of their storyline. Originally, most people assumed that they would just recast Kang after they fired Jonathan Majors for a scene like that. Really good example of that is Thanos at the beginning of Avengers Infinity War with him killing Loki and the other Asgardians. Like, real short part at the beginning of the movie to show what a threat he was and set him up for the rest of the movies. Marvel's options are either to bring him back to do that or recast someone so that they can do something like that, but they kind of wrapped up the Kang storyline at the end of Loki Season 2 in a way that would allow them to explain how they move past it so quickly, because the TVA in the MCU is kind of like the Kang variant's authority now. I think the better example in this case is someone like James Gunn because he was fired and then brought back. So one of the major reasons why Marvel and Disney, and really this is Kevin Feige's overlords at Disney, made the call on that, who brought James Gunn back so quickly after only about a year after they fired him, because it was only about a year, was mostly, and I don't think this is a conspiracy theory, was mostly because all the actors from Guardians of the Galaxy 3 said that they refused to make that movie without James Gunn, and they would all break their contracts in order to do that. All of them were under contract with Marvel for the trilogy. Legally, they would have been forced to make the movie with any director that Marvel picked unless they broke their contracts, which they were going to do. James Gunn, on his side of things, was extremely apologetic after it actually went down, and the reason why Disney fired him in the first place, if you don't actually remember the gory details, he didn't actually commit any real crimes. He wasn't convicted in a court of law of any actual crimes or anything like that. But he did make some really, really bad off-color jokes on his Twitter in the early 2000s, about 10 years or so before he was ever hired by Marvel to make that first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And even though he definitely made all those really bad tweets, like, do not seek them out, they're really bad, none of the stuff in the actual tweets was stuff he actually did for real, like he didn't commit any actual crimes. And since he made those, his record, so to speak, had been squeaky clean. Like, since he'd been working for Marvel in the early 2010s, many years after he made those tweets, he'd been a perfect employee, so to speak, publicly and privately, and he'd made a ton of money for them, which is also a really big deal, too. Like, money talks. Even though a lot of these big corporations, speak in a very moralistic kind of way, make it seem like they're that way, really money does talk. They're all about making money. That's all they really care about. Also probably helped that right after James Gunn was fired, instead of going for Disney and Marvel's throat like Gina Carano, for example, James Gunn was extremely contrite, admitted his wrongdoing, and accepted the blame fully, like, yes, I did all that terrible stuff. I'm very, very sorry for doing that. And he got hired by DC to do Suicide Squad because they didn't care about him making jokes in poor taste 10 to 15 years ago. And Disney and Marvel also probably saw that DC was going to totally poach one of their best directors, their biggest money earners for them, for good if they didn't bring him back. Which DC ended up doing anyway when they hired James Gunn to be their new Kevin Feige, and now he's starting his reboot of the DC movies with the Superman movie in a couple months. We're going to be getting a new trailer for that at the Super Bowl shortly. So it's totally possible that Marvel, in firing him in the first place, planted the seeds of their destruction, their biggest competition, when they didn't have to do that. When a lot of people use Robert Downey Jr.'s example, the reason why he got the pass was because when he was convicted of his crimes and was still in the throes of a very bad drug addiction problem, this was back in 1996. A lot of people don't remember how long ago that was. 12 years before he ever came to Marvel and became Iron Man. But in reality, if you guys didn't realize it, this is also a big deep cut for Avengers Doomsday and his Doctor Doom. Way back in the time before times, in like the early days of comic book films in the early 2000s, Robert Downey Jr. actually screen tested for Doctor Doom during the Chris Evans Fantastic Four movies in 2004. They didn't release it until 2005, but they were casting it in 2004. So if you think about it, it was about 8 years after he actually did have to serve jail time before Marvel was thinking about hiring him again for an actual movie, even though technically it was Fox Marvel that was doing it. Kevin Feige did help out with some of those movies, though. So really the deciding factor in Robert Downey Jr.'s instance is that it had been so long since it happened, and since the time of it happening, he'd been in rehab, his record had been clean, and he'd been a model employee, so to speak. But if you remember all the stories that Kevin Feige and Jon Favreau talk about making that first Iron Man movie, they said that the studio really did not want to hire him because they felt like he was such a big risk, and they really had to go to bat for him, which is why he earned such little money for that first Iron Man movie. He almost did not get cast for that. The studio almost blocked his hiring. So it wasn't like the studio at the time welcomed Robert Downey Jr. with open arms. That didn't come till much later. But a lot of this business with Marvel and Star Wars too firing people in the last few years, because it's been pretty high profile the last couple of years, is mostly Disney firing people and telling Kevin Feige, Marvel, the Star Wars people after the fact, we're firing X person, deal with it, recast or just remove their role from the movies and TV shows entirely, just deal with it somehow. So had Kevin Feige not had to answer to any Disney overlords, there is a solid chance that Jonathan Majors never would have been fired, and if Marvel really did feel like the Kang plot of Avengers 5 Kang Dynasty wasn't going to do well enough at the box office, like financially, and they wanted to try a different story like Robert Downey Jr., Doctor Doom, in Avengers Doomsday, Kevin Feige probably personally would have never fired Jonathan Majors. He would have just included him in less of the next Avengers movies and wrapped up the Kang storyline way faster and then moved on to the Doctor Doom storyline and everything else that they want to do or they thought would earn more money for them. James Gunn even said that when he was being fired by Disney back in 2018, Kevin Feige was trying to go to bat for him with the Disney people. So he was trying to not get him fired, but unsuccessfully, the Disney people overruled Kevin Feige like, no, we're firing him. So really when it comes to firing people, it's not Marvel and Star Wars, for instance. Disney are the really trigger-happy people when it comes to stuff like that. The only actual examples of Marvel outright firing actors or recasting them, which is kind of the same thing, is Edward Norton Hulk and Terrence Howard's Rhodey, and in both cases, they got into bitter disputes for a couple different reasons with the actors over their contracts or the creative direction with their characters. Edward Norton was more of a creative dispute that got really bitter at the time, and a lot of the creatives, like the writers and the director on the Incredible Hulk movie, butted heads with him in a really bad way. The money that they were paying him wasn't the issue in that case. Terrence Howard, though, was more of a financial dispute over his contract with Iron Man 2. But in the case of Jonathan Majors, he wasn't having any of those kinds of issues with Marvel. Like, Marvel liked working with him on a creative level, and he was happy with the money that he was getting paid by Marvel. So even if he was never going to be a main character again, like Marvel decided to move past the Kang character, they would have still kept him around as a minor character at least. But because it's one of those really complex situations that changes constantly, especially with these big Avengers movies, I'll probably wait till we get more details before talking more about Jonathan Majors or what's happening with Kang's involvement or non-involvement in Avengers Doomsday. They're going to be filming that in the next couple of months, so we might actually get some footage from behind the scenes like we did with Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Doomsday. But in better news, we are in the middle of the Super Bowl weekend. It's kind of trailer fest right now in terms of Marvel and DC trailers. I'll try to do videos for everything that they release. There's supposed to at least be a new Superman trailer, some kind of new Thunderbolts trailer. Of course, I will do videos for all that stuff. Probably going to be another one of those weekends when I get zero sleep. Everybody click here for my new Fantastic Four trailer videos, and click here for all my other Super Bowl trailers. I'll be sure to update the link as soon as I post all those. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.